things before we start. You have to listen to me talk for a few minutes. Rachel, are we recording?
Yes, I just started recording.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Okay, so these talks are recorded and posted to YouTube, posted to Meetup, posted to our website. You can find them. If you need to go back and there are live captions available using Zoom's closed caption feature. I think Rachel said in the settings panel, you can click subtitles. Was that it?
I think you can click the closed caption at the bottom, and then I think you do show subtitles when you click the up arrow.
Perfect. Okay, so there's subtitles. If you haven't, please read our code of conduct. It's on our website at Collab Lab Codes /code of conduct. It is in place to make sure that we're maintaining a positive and psychologically safe space for all of our collabbies and all of our friends who come to events like these. And shameless plug, consider sponsoring the Collab Lab. We're volunteer run and we could use a little boost. Okay, so with that, I am so excited to introduce my friend Adrienne Lowe to you all today. She is incredible and I'm so excited to have her here to talk to us about making process work for dev teams. Adrienne is an experienced engineering leader and director of distributed development and ops teams. She's also a beloved keynote speaker who has an incredible way of inspiring and motivating people. I personally, on countless occasions, have been moved by her dazzling energy and solid leadership skills. So thank you, Adrienne. You might recognize or know Adrienne from a number of other tech communities. She has a long history of contributing to a bunch of really notable tech organizations, many of which aim to support underrepresented folks in tech, which I personally find incredibly inspiring. So one of those organizations that Adrienne has put a lot of love and energy into is our organization here, the Collab Lab, where Adrienne has mentored and acted as a responder for our code of conduct. Just a little bit about Collab Lab for anybody here who might not be super familiar with us. We are a nonprofit who is completely volunteer run and it's free to participate. And what we do is we offer early career engineers collaborative project practice. And what that means is that we get small teams together to collaborate on a project under the guidance of a mentor who's experienced in the field. And we don't teach coding, but we focus on teaching those collaborative skills that are necessary to be successful on a team of developers. So we do a lot of pair programming and code reviews and retros and demos and working with agile methodologies, etc. So we run 4 cohorts every year. We're currently in our spring 2021 cohort, which is 5 teams. We have 3 North American teams, a European African team, and a Latin American team that is fully in Spanish. So enough about the Collab Lab. I will drop our website in the chat. If you want to learn more, tweet at us. We'd love to hear from you. But with that, I would love to turn it over so that we can learn more from my good friend, Adrienne. And let me stop my screen share.
Hey y'all. Yep, I'm getting present view over here ready. Alrighty. We had a little bit of trouble paging forward with slides when we did a tech test earlier. So let me just make sure everything is looking good. Okay, y'all should be able to see a title slide now. Can anyone give me a thumbs up?
We see it.
Awesome. I love a double thumbs up. That's awesome. Okay, cool. All right, you can see my name slide, yeah? Awesome. Okay, hey, I'm Adrienne. Thank you for that super warm introduction. That was so sweet, Stacey. I'm really glad to be here. Here's a word cloud of some of my past work and interests. I've been leading dev teams for about 5 years at this point. Across multiple companies, working remotely for many years pre-COVID. And some of the teams I've worked with do Python, Django, work with Kafka, Kubernetes. Most recently, I was leading 2 mobile teams, Android and iOS. And as Stacey said, I'm a former Collab Lab mentor and code of conduct responder. That was a lot of fun. So here at Collab Lab, we know that working as a developer is about so much more than just writing code. It's about participating in and collaborating with others on the processes that help our teams run, from reviewing pull requests to retros, as Stacey said. And on healthy teams, processes are a force for good. They enhance communication and alignment. They document shared values and commitments. They make our work more inclusive and accessible to folks outside of our immediate team. So they're very much a force for good on healthy teams. My goal today is to share advice on how to make processes work for your dev team. And I'm going to do that by focusing on answering the question you see here: what makes a good process? And there are three aspects of a good process that I want to explore with you today. I believe a good process is created for and by the people who use it. It's documented and changeable, and it has reflection and evaluation built in. So we're going to step through each of these with examples. But before we do that, I want to start by addressing some of the negative attitudes I've encountered about process in my years as working as a developer and as a leader of software teams. So these negative attitudes, this is when people say things like, I hate process, or process will only slow us down. It's also when people say things like, you know, sprint retros are just such a waste of time. Ouch, right? I'm proactively bringing up this negativity so that you're less surprised when you do hear it, and to give you an idea of what might be driving these attitudes so you can do something about them on your team. Because at the end of the day, people who say these negative things probably don't hate process. They hate how processes have been used and how it's hurt them. And there's a big difference there. So let's dig a little bit more. When people don't trust their processes, it's often because they don't see how the process is supposed to help them. The process seems to exist for its own sake, not to make any meaningful difference in their life. And when you're in this headspace, thinking about adopting or modifying a process can become intimidating or scary. So what are some other reasons you might say that you hate process? Maybe you don't want to be the one to introduce a process because you don't want to be seen personally as bureaucratic or inflexible. We know that our industry values being fast and flexible, adaptable and changeable, and you don't want to put people, you don't want to pit people against one another or crush innovation. You don't want to be seen as behind the times. Maybe you're afraid that process will cause your team to stagnate. Maybe you've worked on a team where slow, inflexible processes emerge from disorganization or out of touch leadership, and it's just left a bad taste in your mouth. Or maybe you're afraid of process because you've personally been subject to a bad process, a process created without your input or buy-in that wasn't ever documented, couldn't be changed, and wasn't subject to any revision or reevaluation. People who've worked on teams with these kinds of slow, inflexible, and bloated processes that lead to poor communication and low morale are likely to say that they hate process. Whether you're on a dev team or working in education, finance, any industry, you're going to find process misuse in this way. And on these kinds of teams, process is really scapegoated or blamed as the problem, when in reality, any hope of functional process is undermined by other big issues on the team. Issues like these: micromanagement, pervasive fear and threat, poor communication, bullying, terrible documentation. Process is scapegoated or blamed as the problem, when in reality, any hope of functional process is completely undermined by this list of bullies. Healthy processes rarely emerge from toxic environments that feature these behaviors. So when you hear someone say they hate process, consider that they might not hate process itself. They just hate the way it's been applied on the teams that they've been a part of. They hate what they've seen as waste, wasted time, wasted communication, wasted cycles. And remember, process is an easy target. It's so easy to blame or reward the process. I mean, how many times have you been in the room where somebody asks in retro, if only our process had been better, if only we can find like the holy grail of process? But it misses the point. It's very hard to for a healthy process to emerge or flourish in a toxic or dysfunctional environment. So like I said, it's important to be aware that these attitudes are out there, especially if you're newer to the industry, if you're being mentored by somebody, or if you're just joining a team and you hear these kind of negative attitudes. Understand that they're out there, and, you know, get curious about them. If you hear somebody say they hate process, ask questions, talk about your experience together. Look at that as an opportunity to learn together and really get to the bottom of what's going on, because that's what we're going to work on today. On healthy teams, we don't have to fear process or hate it, because it doesn't have to be that way. Process on your team doesn't have to be bloated or bureaucratic. It doesn't have to be imperious or inflexible. It's not something to fear or hate. You can and should create, maintain, and modify processes that have buy-in and work for everybody. And the best way to do that to start is by asking the people closest to the work what's working for them and where they need change. So when processes are created and maintained by the people who use them, they have more trust and adoption. In other words, because you have a stake in creating and maintaining the process, you're more likely to support it or find it useful. You can make it work for you. So the first aspect of good process is that it's created for and by the people who use it. A process can be specific to your immediate team, but when it's grounded in your larger organization or larger team's shared goals and values, it's going to make sense to other teams too. So here I want to introduce an analogy from practitioners of resilience and safety in complex systems. In their book, Behind Human Error, authors including David Woods and Nadine Sarter put people working on teams into two categories. One is called the blunt or dull end, and the other is the sharp end. So as I'm using this analogy from Behind Human Error, try to see what group you fit into. At the sharp end, we have the practitioners, the people doing the work, or as they put it, directly interacting with the hazardous process. And at the dull end, we have the folks who control the resources and constraints. Sound familiar? When you see the sharp end, think developers, designers, and DevOps engineers, the people closest to the work, doing the work, interacting with that hazardous process of code. When you see the blunt end, think managers and vice presidents, executives, those further removed from the actual day-to-day work. The sharp end do so much more than just routinely follow rules and processes. Think about it. As the people interacting directly with the process, our developers, DevOps engineers, testers, and designers do all of the things that the authors mentioned. They resolve conflicts, anticipate hazards, accommodate variation and change. They cope with surprise. Does this sound like your day today as a developer? They work around obstacles. They close gaps between the plans and the real situation, what they set out to do in their sprint, and then somebody got sick and how they covered, or they had a huge customer escalation. Hey, that sounds like your life, right? And you are doing all of these things even when they're not necessarily part of your job description. So the folks on the sharp end, the developers, are the best equipped to tell those of us on the dull end, the managers like me, what is and isn't working in our team's processes and suggest changes and improvements. Possibly you're already working around certain processes or lack thereof in order to get your work done and be effective. This means that a manager's job is not to tell developers what to do and how to do it. A manager's job is to work with their sharp end to create and refine processes that make sense for their team. Doing otherwise is, in my opinion and experience, a huge missed opportunity. So this is the question that I ask when I give this talk to roomfuls of managers, or when I train managers, or do work for lead dev. I challenge the audience by saying it's not enough to know that good processes are created and maintained for and by the people who use them. You have to actually listen to what your sharp end is telling you about how things are and aren't working for them and take action accordingly. You have to do something. And if you're not doing that, why aren't you doing that, Mr. Manager? Or Mrs. Manager, because they are the most well-positioned to tell you how to make things better. And if you're not engaging with their feedback in any form, you're simply not doing your job. And that was, if you're an Arrested Development fan like me, an Arrested Development reference to Little Boy Bluth. So while I'm very hard on managers and hold them to a very high standard, I'm not putting fixing processes all on managers either. Process belongs to everyone and is for everyone. Now, this might be a little confusing, especially if you're newer to the industry, because a process might seem to be owned by one person. So think of the example of an agile ceremony that always gets run by one person or one manager, but that process does not belong to that person. It belongs to all of us because it's for all of us. And that means we're all responsible for making it better. So give feedback. Say, this isn't working because. Don't wait for a savior or an agile coach to come in and fix your process. No one's more of an expert than the folks doing it. And the managers need your feedback in order to make it better. So you can be an agent for change by tying your argument to a goal, business value, or outcome. That's one way I've found a lot of success in my career personally, is when I want something, I tie it to a goal, business value, or an outcome. I say, we are doing X in the service of Y so we can get to Z. And when you make it that clear, it's easier to tell that story up the chain. Connect it with a core value. A lot of us work for mission-driven organizations where we talk about core values, we talk about the way we want to behave. That's another way to make a compelling argument. We are living our core value of X by behaving in Y in the service of Z. And you just put it out there for them like that. Also, don't be afraid to use the existing infrastructure of your one-on-ones, your skip levels, your retrospectives. Speak up, make your voice heard. Find others who think like you and make a plan together. Above all, please don't abdicate your own power. Remember that the process is there to serve you, not the other way around. You do not exist to serve your processes. You do not exist to just go do retros the way they've always been done. You are an active participant in this process and you can inform it to make it better. If your team is following a process just because that's how it's always been done, take a step back. Examine your goals as a team. Is the process still helping you meet those goals? Is it facilitating your success? If yes, great. Keep going. And if no, revisit it, rework it, change. That word change helps us transition into the second aspect of a good process. A good process is documented and changeable. So let's start with documentation because I'm feeling nostalgic for a time we could all travel. Shout out to Write the Docs. It's one of the orgs I've been involved with over the years. They've got a virtual conference coming up this weekend. They're amazing. Documentation and technical writing is something that has long been really important to me. And if it's something that you care about or if it's something you want to level up on, check them out. If you've ever accessed documentation via a Read the Docs hosted site, these are the same people. So software and process both create artifacts of our work together. An artifact of software is code, the code we write, and an artifact of process is documentation. We can build in both change tolerance and inclusion by taking the time to document our processes, writing out how we want to work together. So documenting our processes means writing down how we want to work together in the interest of consistency, transparency, and visibility to others. We don't have to write long or overly formal documents, but we can have values that we can look at when it's time to reflect and change. Documenting our processes means taking the time to write things like onboarding guides, templates, tutorials, and more. Collab is so amazing at this. It's truly a doc-centered organization. Y'all have been that way since the beginning. It's one of the reasons it's been such a pleasure to work with y'all, because you've always made it clear how to contribute, how to get help, what steps to take, how to file an issue, who has your back and why. It's really great. So, you know, taking the time to write these artifacts helps us, but the impact is felt beyond our team. Documenting our process makes our work more accessible to folks outside of our team. When we do these things, we write documentation. And when we write docs, we make it easier for others to join us, to come in and work with us. And yes, this work takes time and effort, of course, a lot of time sometimes, but the investment yields major gains in our alignment as a team and as an org. It is, in my opinion, completely worth it. So next up, the second part of that phrase, a good process is not just documented, but it's also changeable. As engineers and technologists, we understand the importance of building change tolerance into our software. You heard me use that phrase a moment ago, so I'm going to explain that a little bit more. Fundamentally, the idea here is we understand and expect software to change. In his article on design quality with a name, Jim Shore defines high quality software architecture this way. A good software design minimizes the time required to create, modify, and maintain the software while achieving acceptable runtime performance. And in their book, Implementing Lean Software Development, which is a book about process, it's a book about agile process, Mary and Tom Poppendieck add almost everything we know about good software architecture has to do with making software easy to change. So let's apply that same principle to our process. Like software, our processes are not one and done, set it and forget it. Like input from our users, we will receive feedback from our teams and organizations about what is and isn't working for us. So for our processes to have continued buy-in, they must reflect the changing reality of our teams and goals. As our teams grow and change, we must examine our processes and be willing to change them if they don't still work for us. So here's a caveat as we segue to the final aspect of a good process. Yes, like software, processes need to be changeable. And when we're working together to decide how to change the process, we are going to disagree. I support that. Disagree while you're deciding how to implement. But once your team agrees how to change the process, commit to really trying your new flow before judging it. It's step, which is the reflection and evaluation. The fact is you can't reflect honestly on something you haven't really tried. If you haven't given something a fair shake, you're not really qualified to judge it. So in other words, don't be this kid. She has decided she hates broccoli and she hasn't even tried broccoli. Don't give up on your processes like that. Give them a fair try before you give up. If you do, you'll be ready when it comes time to evaluate the process and reflect on it. And because this is a global audience, I will say specifically, also do that when you come into a new org. Give the team a try before you introduce the process. Now, I'm saying this as a manager who is literally hired to come in and rehabilitate teams that are not working. They are not as high performing as they could be, both to be a direct manager and to consult on teams that need this help. Even I don't come in and immediately make change. It's important to get to know the people, know the team, know the process, know the history. But once you feel confident that you've learned enough and you're ready to have your say on how things could be better, work with the group to do that. Disagree and commit. All right, that leads to our final aspect of a good process. It has reflection and evaluation built in. We have to be willing to reflect on our processes. Before we can change them, we have to give them a thoughtful review. And here I'm going to think of an analogy that is very familiar to you, that of a code review or a pull request. When someone requests our review on a PR, we don't just click into GitHub and immediately request changes, nor do we rubber stamp it LGTM. Hopefully you don't do that if you're my developer. Instead, we take the time to try to read the PR, try it out in a test environment, leave comments, really play with it. We do this because while we might seem to move faster by skipping these steps, this due diligence, we end up with a higher rate of error and misalignment, which causes everything to move slower. And our processes deserve the same kind of careful review. Because they're created for and by the people who use them and reflect the changing reality of our teams and goals, we must be willing to build in time to reflect on our processes and consider how they are and aren't working for us. Letting ineffective processes continue without reflection will slow us down just as surely as integrating untested code. So talk one-on-one and talk as a team too. You can use part of your one-on-one to find out how a particular process is affecting one of your direct reports if you're a manager, or if you are the direct report, you can use your one-on-one to tell your manager how your process is slowing you down or how it's confusing or unclear. You can use sprint retrospectives or incident reviews to talk about how certain processes were part of the problem or solution. I also recommend scheduling time quarterly to meet and discuss as a group. So in summary, 3 principles of good process that build in inclusion from the start. Number 1, good processes are created for and by the people who use them. Number 2, they are documented and changeable. And number 3, they have reflection and evaluation built in. So I hope that in this talk, you've been able to think of some real life examples of times that you've struggled with process or seen others frustrated by them, times that they haven't felt relevant, and maybe you're starting to get curious about why they didn't feel relevant and why they weren't working. And I just want to end with one more story from my life to help motivate you. This story is actually about the process of writing this talk. I wrote it like I've written all my others in a Google Doc. I titled the document on process and laughed because it made me think back 10 years ago when I was sitting in front of a word processor in a very different context, which was writing my master's thesis, which is a big black book in the middle of the top shelf over there, the really thick one. My master's thesis started out with basically the same name, on process, but in a really different context. I went to seminary. I went to the world's, I think to my knowledge, only Quaker seminary. And my master's thesis was on something called process philosophy, and in the context of the seminary, on process theology. Now, philosophy, like process, can sometimes get a pretty bad rap for being pie in the sky or ivory tower or out of touch. That's because, going back to what I said at the beginning of this talk, when it's not connected to your real life or actual lived experience, you don't see how it's relevant. But process philosophy doesn't do that. And I think that's why I loved it. It was always grounded and down to earth. So let me tell you just a little bit more. Process philosophy is based on the premise that reality itself is dynamic, that we experience our world and ourselves as continuously changing and growing. Process philosophy points to the processive nature of being or existence, or how we're always changing and growing. In process philosophy, process isn't a dirty word, nor is it something to fear or minimize. Instead, it's something to embrace because it's our reality. It's what is. I don't know about you, but in a time when so much seems so scary and overwhelming, focusing and reflecting on my actual real lived experience makes a hell of a difference in helping me calm down and stay focused and stay motivated. If it sounds like mindfulness, yes, very similar. I'd like to encourage you to do the same. Don't fight your reality. Don't fight the inevitability of change. When we create and evaluate processes, let's support us. Let's make sure our processes are easily changeable, which coheres with reality itself, not to mention, the principles of good software architecture, so that we routinely and intentionally ask if that process is still serving us. Things change after all. So let's cultivate these healthy attitudes about process and create supporting structures that make sense. In doing so, we will create process that not only works for our team, but actually in a deeply philosophical and metaphysical way coheres with a view of reality itself. I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, that's my talk. I'm Adrienne. I write about practical people-focused leadership and engineering management at my website, Leading with Spoons. If you've heard of the spoons metaphor, that's what I'm referring to. Having them. And you can follow me on Twitter, keep the conversation going there. But we have plenty of time now to chat. So let's do that. If you have questions or things that have come up for you, I'd love to talk. Thanks so much for your time.